Hi, I'm Mark Ryan. In this video, I'll be showing some experiments to see how OpenAI's Codex system deals with COBOL. COBOL is a language that dates from the late 1950s, and is still used to run many essential systems today. Codex is OpenAI's latest variation on GPT-3. Can a cutting-edge deep learning system deal with code from the era of punch cards? Let's see. What does OpenAI's documentation say about the languages that Codex covers? It says, the Codex model series is a descendant of our base GPT-3 series that's been trained on both natural language and billions of lines of code. It's most capable in Python and proficient in over a dozen languages, including JavaScript, Go, Perl, PHP, Ruby, Swift, TypeScript, SQL, and even Shell. But what about COBOL? Let's try some experiments to find out what Codex can do with COBOL. For the first experiment, we'll start with Hello World in Python and see if Codex can generate a COBOL Hello World program. We'll start with the prompt in Codex documentation for converting between languages. It'll bring up the playground, and here we'll change the prompt. So this prompt is currently going from Python to R, and we'll change it to say from Python to COBOL. And in Python version, we'll put in the Python Hello World code. And then we'll change the target from R to COBOL. And click on Submit to see what Codex generates. Okay. And go back, and that looks like a reasonable COBOL program. To test whether the COBOL that was produced by Codex is in fact valid COBOL, we'll use OpenCOBOL, which is a free IDE that works on Windows. So let's see what happens when we run it. So the first thing we're going to need to do is paste in the code that Codex generated. Now, as we put it in, we're going to see one of the items. First, we're going to get rid of the leading number sign on all the lines of output COBOL code. And then what we see here is one of the artifacts of COBOL originating in the era of punch cards. And that is that the first 7 columns are for sequence codes for the punch cards. So we will move the code so that it is aligned with the 8th column. And then we're going to hit the hammer to compile the code and hit the green arrow to run it. And sure enough, it's a valid COBOL program that produces Hello World. So we've successfully gone Hello World from Python to COBOL. Now we're going to try going in the other direction. That is from the COBOL that was generated by Codex to see if it can produce a valid Hello World program in Python. So we're going to paste in the prompt that includes the COBOL that was generated last time, cleaned up, and click on Submit and see what Codex returns. So it puts out some extra stuff, but there it is. Print Hello World, a valid Python Hello World program. Now, Hello World obviously isn't the most challenging test. You can assume the training corpus for Codex included Hello World in many languages, and all it really had to do was look up Hello World it had copied for COBOL and Python and exchange between the two. So let's try a more challenging experiment. Starting with code in Python that sums 2 numbers, let's see if it can generate COBOL that does the same thing. So there's a simple function in Python that sums 2 numbers, and we've got the prompt set up to produce COBOL. Let's see what it generates. Okay, so this is looking a little bit COBOL-esque, and I'm no COBOL expert, but I can tell that this is not heading towards something that's actually going to work. And more output, yeah. So I think we can call this experiment a failure. So summing 2 numbers didn't work going from Python to COBOL, but what about the other direction? So what we're going to do is start with a COBOL program that inputs two numbers and returns the sum of them, and see if Codex can generate equivalent code in Python. So there's the COBOL code. As you can see, it's pretty wordy. COBOL is not a very succinct language. Okay, now this looks like it is valid Python. Not bad, but we need to test it. Okay, one more prompt to get everything we need. All right, so we got something that looks Python-esque as output from Codex. Let's see if it'll work. Now the output we got from Codex had some extraneous number signs. So what we've done here, this just shows the output from Codex with the number signs removed from the valid Python commands. So just cleaned up a little bit. And now we're going to try running that Python program that was cleaned up. I'm going to validate the version of Python running on 3.7.4 and run the program. And it prompts us for one number, prompts for another number, and generates output. Okay, so we got working Python. The next question is, does it match what we get from COBOL? So for completeness, we're going to take the starting code that we had from COBOL to sum two numbers. We're going to run it in OpenCOBOL and see that we get the same results that we got for Python. So like we did before, hit the hammer, then the green arrow. It prompts us for one number. We enter it, prompts us for a second number, and it generates echoes the numbers and echoes the sum. So we've established that we get taking a valid COBOL program, running it through Codex, we get a valid Python program to sum two numbers. And that's it, a set of experiments to see how Codex deals with COBOL. Now for a language that isn't on the list of languages that Codex is proficient in, it did okay with these simple tests. And I was particularly impressed that Codex was able to generate valid Python from the COBOL sum program. And I think that's really the most useful use case, converting COBOL to Python. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.